Hi folks, welcome back to another channel. Today we're talking about all the books that I read in the month of March. If you're new here, my name is Nikita, and on this channel we try to focus on BIPOC stories and BIPOC books, especially South Asian books. And as I say that, I realize there's not too many BIPOC books that I read in the month of March. I didn't read that much in March to begin with, so forgive me, but April, there's a lot more BIPOC books coming your way. Hi folks, it's Editing Nikita here. Unfortunately, in this video, there is a tiny bit of an issue with my mic. From time to time, you may hear just a bit of a buzzing. I've done my best to minimize it. I don't want to redo the video because I would like to stick to my schedule that I've promised everyone here. So I hope it's not too much of a nuisance. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for being here. The first book that I finished in the month of March was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. I've been talking about this. I've spoken about it in a couple previous videos. So if you're sick of hearing about it, like fast forward. But this is the second part in the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies series. This series basically follows Emily Wilde. It's set in 1800s, I believe, late 1800s, and Emily Wilde is a professor at Oxford of everything fae and fairy. And so there is fantasy in it. This is a fantasy book, but it's very like low stakes. It's basically about Emily Wilde getting up to, like shenanigans, trying to track and study the fae. And you have a bit of romance in here, you have a bit of a mystery in here. Part 2, particularly, I enjoyed. Probably not more than the first one. A lot of people on Goodreads were saying that they enjoyed Part 2 more than the first one. For me, Part 1 still wins because I think it was just a novelty of this subgenre. Cozy fantasy is very new to me. And Emily Wilde and all these characters are just so lovable, but she's very like curmudgeonly and she struggles a little bit with social skills. And so there's a bit of a romance in here. You have a fun cast of characters. There's great world building. In the second book, she is traveling to map out the Otherlands like it sounds. You definitely see a lot more of some of the other characters. There is a bit more action in this one than there was in the first one. And there's a mystery that starts in the first one but ends in this one. About Daniel de Grey. So I liked how the story had a little bit of something for everybody. Having said that, I did get a little bit tired of it at some point. I think that's also partly on me because this happens for me when I read a series back to back. And that is what I did with this one. But regardless, I still ended up giving it about 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I do recommend it. If you are looking to get into fantasy and you don't want high fantasy feels intimidating for you, I would suggest trying this series out. It is very cozy, it's very funny, it's very quirky, and the world building is not too intense either, but still satisfactory. In the month of March, I went on a Greek retelling binge. So if you really enjoy Greek mythological retellings, you're gonna love what I'm gonna talk about next, but if this is not your cup of tea, hey, maybe you might change your mind. But I read 3 Greek mythological retellings the month of March. The first one was Clytemnestra by Constanza Kitsati. I don't have the physical copy of this. I will be adding it to my collection because it was so good. This is a debut author, and this author is younger than me. And I think when I found that out, it was a bit of a rude awakening for me, but she's younger than me. And wow, what a debut author. Like, it was incredible. I have so much respect for this author, but this is basically a story about Clytemnestra like it sounds. If you are familiar with the Greek mythology, you'll remember that she's the wife of Agamemnon in Greek mythology, and this takes place definitely in Clytemnestra and Helen's childhood, but a big chunk of it is set during the Trojan War. Clytemnestra was sisters with Helen of Sparta, or known as Helen of Troy. And I didn't know too much about Clytemnestra, and so this really has her entire life in it, and it was really nicely done. I did find it a little bit too long in some points, but you have such a great feminist retelling and feminist narrative that is really centered around the women living in, a man's war. We also got to see a little bit about her relationship with her mother, her relationship with Helen, her relationship with her daughter Electra. I've also read Electra by Jennifer Saint, which was also really great. But you just, you see all of these Greek women living through this 10-year period of the Trojan War. And you see Clytemnestra's relationship with all of them. You see her journey as a mother. You see her journey as a warrior. You see her journey as a murderer. And it was really, really incredible. The way the story was woven, like I was engaged pretty much all of the time, except there were a couple lulls. There were a couple lulls for me in the middle, and a couple chapters that felt a little bit unnecessary to me. But overall, great book. I gave it 4 stars. After that, I needed more. I needed more. So I've had in my collection for a long time Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. And so I decided to pick it up. It was actually surprisingly a very, 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 very quick read. Stone Blind is about Medusa, one of the original villains in Greek mythology. And again, if you can't already tell, this was a feminist retelling of the original female villain and how she really came about to be. I really enjoy Natalie Haynes' other books. I have read a couple others. I was introduced to Greek mythological retellings by Natalie Haynes' work and the work of Madeline Miller. She wrote Circe. I will say Stone Blind is not my favorite. I still ended up giving it 4 stars. Now, here are the things that I loved about Stone Blind. I liked how easy it was to read. Like, I flew through this book. It is a chunky book if you see it in person, but I flew through it. Some chapters were really short, some were longer, and you have very much a multitude of different perspectives. There's a frankness with which Natalie Haynes writes. She's very frank and ruthless and brutal when she embodies her characters, and I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed learning about Medusa's past and how she became Medusa. Now, this brings me to what I didn't like about the book. The book was not nearly enough about Medusa. I felt personally a little bit misled here. I felt like it was going to be a lot more about Medusa, but Medusa makes she's a minor character in a book that is essentially about her. And I wanted to see a lot more of her. I wanted to see a lot more of her thoughts. I wanted to see a lot more of her perspectives. I wanted to see just more of her story. There's a ton of other characters in this book, which really does add to the story as well. And that wasn't a bad thing. I just wish there was a lot more of Medusa. What we do see though in this book is it starts off with Medusa, but then you also have interchanging perspectives. You have Athena in there, you have Perseus and his journey, and so it just felt a little bit untrue to the title. But regardless, I still gave it 4 stars because I thought it was really, really nicely written. And like Natalie Haynes' Greek retellings are just so captivating. And the third and the final Greek mythological retelling that I read and finished in the month of March is The Silence of the Girls, which is the first one in the Women of Troy series by Pat Barker. Now, this is a book that I started reading a couple years ago, but I abandoned it at 50% because I think I had overdone the Greek mythological retellings at that point, and I probably just felt burnt out, so I abandoned it. But I decided to pick it back up, and I finished it this time around, and it was so good. So Silence of the Girls is, again, a feminist mythological retelling, but this one only takes place during the Trojan War, so the 10 years, and you have perspectives of all of these multiple women. So you have women of Troy, you have women of Greece, you have women of Sparta, and all of these different characters that we know have existed. You have their perspective. So there's a bit of Clytemnestra in here. There is a lot of Briseis in here. Briseis is the main storyteller in this, and you hear a lot about the start of the war from her perspective, her captivation, her relationship with Achilles. You have a bit of Iphigenia in here too, if I'm remembering correctly, if I'm not confusing it with another book, but it is primarily from the perspective of Briseis, and you really get to see the suffering and the silence of women and girls for 10 years. Now, I really enjoyed this. This book was painful. Okay, I will say all of these books, Clytemnestra, Stone Blind, and Silence of the Girls, very triggering. Okay, there's just a ton of sexual violence in here. And Silence of the Girls, I Remember, it definitely was a little bit more graphic, and if you know that's extremely triggering for you, or that's not your cup of tea, you can skip over those bits, or you can avoid the book entirely. But it was so well done. Like, it was gut wrenching at some points, but this book made me hopeful. This book made me cry. This book made me feel really enraged. You really see the lives that these women are living on the Trojan camp year after year after year in this decade-long war, and how their lives are just kind of woven into one another. Towards the end, you definitely do see the fate of the captured Trojan queen and princesses. And what that's like. Again, like, there's quite a bit of violence, sexual violence and murders and whatnot. And so I would be cognizant when you're picking this book up. It wasn't gory, but there was just a lot of it. And I think that was the point of it too, to kind of help convey the brutality that exists in these stories. And now that I talk about it, I think that was the reason why I put it down a couple years ago. I think it just felt like too much, but I'm so glad I finished it. I would still recommend it if you have stomach for some of this stuff, you know, or you can take breaks or you can skip over these chapters. It's really, really well written. Like, Pat Barker is a really good writer. I ended up giving this 3.75 4 stars. And the last book that I finished in the month of March was The Teacher by Frida McFadden. I flew through this. Frida McFadden is the same one who wrote The Housemaid, and she is, you know, just like blowing up right now on YouTube and on BookTube and Bookstagram. And I really enjoyed it. This was not what I thought it was going to be. Initially, when I picked it up, I thought it felt a little bit reminiscent of Pretty Little Liars, but it's a lot more mature than that, and it's a great, great book. So in this book, you're following a couple main characters. You have Eve, who is a young woman, and she's also a high school teacher, and you have Addie, who is a high school student. Basically, a lot of stuff went down the year before with Addie and a male teacher at the school who was let go, and now there's a lot of rumors around Addie. And Eve finds herself intertwined in these rumors, and essentially you're looking at a face-off between Addie and Eve. It says here on the back that Addie will do anything to keep her quiet, and that is definitely part of the book, but it's not so straightforward as it seems. Frida McFadden has really good like twists and turns. If you're looking for a good book for perhaps the weekend or like a long plane ride or a vacation, like a fast-paced thriller, I would recommend this. Trigger warning though, there's definitely like abuse of power in here, as you can imagine, like teacher-student dynamics, especially when you are talking about potential sexual relationships. There's abuse of power here. But other than that, there was nothing that was quite triggering, but this was fun. This was a lot of fun. I actually ended up buying The Coworker by Frida McFadden too. I ordered it at a moment of weakness, and I just ordered it on Amazon. But I'm very happy that I have a physical copy of this, because I would love to add this to my list. All right, folks, that's it. That was a short reading month for sure. March was busy. I was in a bit of a reading slump, but I have been reading a little bit more at what feels like is my pace. And again, you know, it's not about how many books you can get to, it's about how many books can get to you. And so it's okay, whatever number of books that we read. Let me know if any of these sound interesting to you. If you enjoy Greek mythological retellings, I would love to do a video just on those recommendations. Let me know if that's something that you would like. Once again, thanks so much for being here. Let me know your favorite book that you read in the month of March, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!